I'm Randy Hurst. This is Robert Griggs, president of Trinity Products.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about the steel pipe business.
Great.
All right. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
All right. I wanted to ask you, Robert, when did you get in the pipe business? What year was it, and who did you start have your first?
1977. I took a job. I answered an ad for Associated Pipe out of Denver, Colorado. Bill Boyer was the owner.
Associated Pipe.
Yep. And I worked for Bill for about 18 months. Bill went up, and this is kind of what ended our career together. You got paid commission. I looked up the other day, I got my Social Security form, and it tells you all the years of how much money you made. So I made $7,600 the first year in 1977. I made $9,200 the next year, and I was a straight commission salesman, and we got commission when our customers paid us. So Bill bought about 50,000 feet of 48-inch by half fusion bond Nippon steel from the Alyeska pipeline. Okay, shipped it all down into Seattle, and then I sold maybe 20,000 feet of it, and I had a big commission check coming, and I sold about 10,000 feet to Valley Steel at the time. And people don't realize in 1977 and 79, Valley Steel, when Prime was selling for $400 a ton, sold $210 million a pipe. People just don't realize how big they are. They had 100 salesmen. Jim Barnes, our friend from Barnes Pipe, was over there as a product manager. They were huge. They were enormous companies. So I sold this 10,000 feet, and it was probably in August or September. The pipe got delivered. It should have been paid, and it was Christmas, and I got my commission check, and there was a $25 bonus for Christmas with no commission check. So I called Bill, and I said, Bill, you know, Valley Steel's huge. They had to have paid you. Why isn't my, check on there, my commission? And he said, well, they haven't paid us. So at the time, I was 23. I called Harold Mayberry, the credit manager for a $200 million company, and I said, Mr. Mayberry, I can't believe, why didn't you pay this invoice? And he said, ask your boss how much money he owes me. So I went in, I thought about it for a while, and I went into my boss and I said, I'm quitting, all right, if I can't get paid. And he said, I don't like it here either. He goes, let's quit together. And so we started a company in 1979. So I was myself, Sal Lavasco. Sal had worked for Valley Steel, and Sal was Tubular Steel's 7th employee. So here in St. Louis, and St. Louis was a hub for pipe salesmen. And Skip Allen was from Detroit, Michigan area, and had been in the used pipe business. So it was Skip, Sal, and I, they're the Trinity. And we just started buying and selling. Skip lasted a year, and then Sal and I went on. And so in 1993, I bought Sal out. Okay, Sal just didn't want to grow. In 1993, we sold $2.1 million. And last year, in 2018, we sold $105 million. So in 25 years from him leaving, we went from $2 million to 105.
And is that how you came up with the Trinity?
The three of us.
Three of you guys.
Yep. And so that's the story. Bought Sal out in 93. In 2000, we moved over here to this location. And all that time, for about 20 years, I was writing yearly or every 2 years a plan, giving it to the bank to do a pipe mill. And here's why. You being a distributor, you'll have the same concerns. In the distribution business, a lot of it is friendship. And one guy runs the order book, and he's your friend, and he's working there, and then if he leaves, he might say, well, I don't like Robert anymore. So you felt vulnerable to it, right? So I thought, we have enough salesmen, we have enough people to sell, let's just do a spiral pipe mill, and then we'll have enough pipe to sell, and sell it the same way to end users and distributors. So I wrote that plan over and over and over again, year after year, submitted it to the bank, and then the right year came. And in 2006, borrowed $12 or $15 million, bought a pipe mill out of Turkey, bought 12 acres at our mill location. We now have 50 acres there, and put in the building and the pipe mill.
And so you, in your pipe experience for 42 years, for 1 or 2 years you were with Associated and
Yep.
then Trinity, and that's
been it.
That's it.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep. And I also learned don't put your hand in your employees' pockets, all right? Because that's how I left, okay?
Sure.
So write a commission plan, pay the commission plan, be happy that you're paying commissions because that's what ownership means. You've written the plan. And so it's like the story I use for guys, don't put your hand in my pocket and I won't put my hand in yours.
Very good.
Yep.
Yeah. And now Sal, who you were with there for at the genesis of Trinity,
right,
and then for the first dozen years or so, were there any other notable characters, or do you want to tell me anything more about Sal?
In that, everybody in that period was a character, and it's a little, I'm not going to hide from this. The pipe industry was a little bit of a cowboy thing, and there were bad things going on. There was re-stenciling of prime pipe. There was all kinds of selling new for used, and there was all this. And so I was always disenchanted in how the industry looked and appeared. And that was one of the reasons to get to the pipe mill is, listen, I had some control over this. I'm making this product myself. But there was a lot of characters. Mike Dim with Pipe and Piling. Yep. I don't know why, when I joined the NASPD, Mike and Saul Rakels, do you remember Saul Rakels?
Absolutely.
Okay. And a group of those guys took me under the wing. They liked me. I don't know why. I was a kid and maybe I did everything they wanted me to do. And so Pete Knowles from Ginsco and a bunch of those old-time guys. So I got along with all those guys. And Mike, I learned a lot from. He was a tough customer, but if he liked you, he'd go to 100 miles for you. And if he didn't like you, he wouldn't. And you had mentioned in your questions a job. When you go to New York, there's a couple of jobs there that were very interesting, but probably in 85, we sold 90,000 feet of 24-inch used pipe, then they wanted used, for the Ellis Island walkway. So it was when they were taking over Ellis Island, they were building a museum out of it. And so that was a really good job, and it was with Mike, and he was hard to deal with, but we got that put together. And so that was one of the fun things that you got to do. And in piling in those days, used pipe or structural pipe was just, nobody bought prime pipe for piling.
And when you talk about Mike Dim, Saul Rakels, I remember those guys because I used to work for a Canadian pipe company. Okay. And they were Eastern Canadian. Canadian. Yep. And so did you do a lot with some of the other, was the Eastern Canadian master distributors somebody who you worked with a lot? Yeah, and we also did a lot with IPSCO at the time because IPSCO had the spiral weld mill, and we could import excess spiral weld, and I always got along with spiral weld, and I have been a proponent and fighter. And how I got to that point, and it's a good story. How spiral weld pipe became, in the United States, the majority of the pipe 20 years ago or 30 years ago was D-saw. It does double submerged arc weld, plate, and you form it. In Europe, almost all the pipe was spiral weld, okay? You can make a lot more sizes, it's more economical. So I wondered how spiral got such bad connotations. Well, in Europe, they'd buy a new mill and they would send their old mill over to the United States, and somebody like Capco or Georgia Tubular would buy these old mills, and then they would make bad pipe. Okay, and occasionally a pipe would fall apart and all that. So that's how spiral weld got a bad name. But in Europe, I mean, they were making API pipe, and in Canada, actually, spiral weld was basically all that was manufactured. So I had faith in it because I traveled all over the world. I knew the economics of it. And so I went and did that, and I thought that that was the most robust way and easiest way to go about having a good pipe product. Very good. When you were, I want to say our 34th president of the NASPD? Something like that, Something like that, right before Greg Semmel became president. And, what I'd like to know is how you got started with the NASPD. Was there somebody who kind of brought you in? or was, how did that whole thing?
Well, I've always thought, and it just made sense to me, that if you're going to be in an industry, you needed to be in the industry trade association, right? I don't know why it made sense. So I got involved as a kid, man. Sal wouldn't go. I was 25 and going, right? And 26 and 27. And I just wanted to meet all the guys in it, and I knew something positive would come from it. It almost always does. You make another relationship. I talk about it all the time. The NASPD helps bad deals better than it helps good deals, because you have a relationship with someone and you have faith in them, you have trust, and you see them. So I got involved basically on my own. I don't remember who asked me to be in. It might have been Joe Bergfeld. Joe was in town. There was a lot of St. Louis guys in town, and so I got involved. And I think I was kind of the cusp going forward of old regime, okay? I mean, old guys who started it, right? I mean, all the guys that were presidents. I was in there, and then Greg, and then another group of younger guys that weren't involved with the used downhole, because that's what it started as, a used structural downhole pipe group. Right? So I was kind of in the middle. The association was in a good place, good position, had money in the bank, had really good members and membership, and people were loyal.
And this was mid-'80s? Maybe?
Yes, yeah. Probably 84, 5, 6, something in that range.
Sure.
I didn't look it up today. But so that was the transition. I was the kind of guy in the middle, and then everybody else kind of went for instead of old structural used guys, right, which were those guys, now the people that were coming in were new surplus prime distributor kind of people, and then it evolved into what it is today. A lot of big steel mills, which you need there, a lot of big distributors, and it's a good forum for people to get messages and information across.
Sure. I'll come back to the NASPD, Robert, but I want to circle back. There was something that I wanted to ask you about St. Louis. And, when I started in the pipe business in 1980, and all through the 80s and into the 90s, St. Louis was a major city for steel pipe companies. Valley Steel, of course, was so huge. LaBarge, and it just seemed like there were so many pipe companies in St. Louis, and I could never really think back and figure out how, why.
It's because of Valley Steel. Valley Steel, and people don't know this, invented Senior Crancher, started the company. And I'll give you my theory on Valley, on why they went out of business. But as I told you earlier, in 1979, they sold $200 million when Prime was selling for $350 and $400 a ton. And scrap was $10 or $15 a ton. So that's a lot of tons. They were downhole, they were mining bolts, they had 400 trucks in their fleet. They were an enormous company. And so they hired a lot of people. So Jack Houck from Tubular Steel was a Valley Steel guy. The LaBarge guy was a Valley Steel guy. Every guy in town was an ex-Valley Steel guy. And if you weren't, you were off a tree of a guy that was a Valley Steel guy. So how Valley started with the telemarketing is during World War II, they put rubber and gasoline, tires and gasoline on rations, rationing. And so Senior Crancher was selling downhole water well pipe in Iowa and Illinois and all around Missouri, right? And so he would have a salesman, and the salesman would make a route and drive in an area and meet a water well driller and say, what do you want for the next 3 months? What's your order? And he'd go, I'll take 2,000 feet and 4,000 feet and 2,000 feet, right? So during the war of this rationing, Senior said, we can't go out now, but every other month, because we don't have gasoline, we don't have this. So I'm going to call you. So all the salesmen, when they met with their drillers, said, I'm going to call you on the second Tuesday of the month at 10 o'clock at the so-and-so store or your house, and you're going to place your order with me because I don't have gasoline to be able to drive there because of World War II. So then after they did that, they go, well, why am I driving over there again? And why am I driving over there again? So that's basically how telemarketing, because pipe is a real homogeneous product, right? 6 5/8 standard wall, 8 5/8, everybody knows what they are. And so that's how telemarketing and pipe, and then Valley Steel was the person who is in the lineage of everybody. I mean, look at the guys went out to California and did it. I mean, a lot of people left.
Earl Cohen.
Yeah, Earl Cohen, right.
Yeah. Okay, so it was really just like the Valley Steel boom.
It was it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I'm going to circle back now to the NASPD. Do you remember your first convention? Do you remember where it was?
I'm sure it was San Antonio, because back then all those guys met every year in San Antonio. Yeah. And so we went to San Antonio and we met there, and I still think it was 3 conventions, but not everybody went to every one back then. It got to be the point where you would go Central, East, West, right? And you might go West every 2 years because there were fewer people. So it had to be San Antonio.
Gotcha. And did you hang out with a certain group of friends?
Just walked in and talked to everybody. And, Greg was there. Greg was in the pipe business, Greg Summel with Omega. And there were just guys there. There were some people your age, but, the older guys were nice to me and kind and included you. I think there was a lot of that went on that made you feel good.
Yeah. And you're still active in the NASPD to this day, so thank you for that. Can you talk about maybe some of the memorable changes in our industry over the years? I know people often talk about the way we communicate, how it's changed.
Yeah.
We are old school. Telephone was.
We started with yellow pages, okay, and people don't realize this, but you could call Southwestern Bell and you could go, give me the yellow pages for Denver, Columbus, Ohio. And so we had every yellow pages, and we just opened the yellow pages and we just dialed. And then we had index cards and we would write what sizes they used. And the guys who were the best at selling had the best memories, because the way, you remember somebody in the purchasing department go, I just bought 4 loads of 8 5/8 standard wall and it's at $400 a ton. It's FOB so-and-so, go sell it. So you would pull your cards out and you go ting, ting, ting. Hey, you want a load? And that's how you sold it back then.
Right.
So that's how it went, and then computers came in. I still have green bar paper that we did. Phyllis has it in the other room. Phyllis has been with me for 42 years. And so we still have green bar paper where we did our accounting on, right? So when it morphed into, I think today, it was so fun to sell and make friends out of your customers, and there were just people that you liked on the phone and that you felt good about, and you made a living because they liked you and you did things for them, right? And you could supply them. I find today that that's missing a little bit. It might be with some smaller customers, but between texting, I had a 67-year-old customer today, Zigginvest Well Drilling in Ringos, New Jersey. I've sold forever. Mark texts me, okay? And he goes, deliver it to this address. And then I say, okay, give me the number for the guy in the yard. He goes, no, I said deliver it to this address. We don't talk anymore. And so it's extremely hard to build. What I like is that relationship of, I'm always going to do the right thing. The cheapest number isn't always the best number, okay? Know what you're getting, know who you're dealing with, but everybody's dealing with that, okay? So it's not just the pipe industry.
Right. If you could go back in time and meet yourself, what advice would you give the young Robert Griggs?
We did a lot of good things right. Here's what I would say. I think the steel pipe industry was a little ragged and a little dishonest in the 70s and 80s, okay? And there were people that didn't do it the right way, which was disheartening. I would say make sure you keep doing it the right way. Don't get sucked into the others, okay? And then secondly, keep doing what we're doing now. Tell the truth and do the right thing, okay? It's very simple, man. You keep doing those and you'll stay in business. Doesn't mean you'll make an enormous profit, but you will be in business by doing those 2 things over and over and over again.
You bet. If you could try to explain the amount of work and effort that you have done, if you could try to explain that to a new young guy, Can you put that into words?
You know, I was talking to somebody today, and here's the thing. For 42 years, I've been not at this desk 20 years, but I've been at my desk at 7:30 every morning, okay? And now it probably doesn't matter because you just answer the cell phone. But in those days, it mattered, okay? You had to get to the desk to answer the phone, and there were people calling. I think that consistency of always being there every day, always getting back to people promptly, and if you couldn't do it, saying no. Hey, I can't do this. Let me figure out a way. If you want me to try, I'll figure out a way, but I can't do this. I would say those are the things that I think are really appropriate.
You bet. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's because we're talking about a different brand of folks.
Nobody realizes. I mean, what has cell phones been really around? 15 years, maybe, really popularly. Yeah. Okay. So 25 years of my career, or 27, you had to be at that desk, and that phone had to ring. Maybe we were forwarding phones some, but it wasn't a normal thing. It was be at the desk and answer the phone.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. No. That's a good point. Was there a pivotal or defining moment that impacted your business, whether it be positively or negatively?
Oh gosh.
With your spiral weld mill,
yeah,
that was a big.
The spiral weld mill, and it was really funny. And I have a lot of friends in the pipe business, but they did not know how long I'd been planning this mill. And a lot of my friends, when it got announced that we were doing it, looked at me and said, "You're crazy, man. This is nuts. It's not going to work." And I just always said to them, "You just don't know what I know." Okay, I had that time 15 sales guys. We were selling 1,000 tons a month. So all they would do was turn around and make it, right? And make the size. And then any excess I sold off that, sell it to my friends at a discounted price, right? So, and be that distributor or supplier for the distributor. So people did not think that would work. I knew that was going to work. I didn't have any fear. I'd written the plan 1,000 times. So that would be the defining moment. A couple of things that happened that were scary is the Gulf War. I don't remember the month that happened, but our order stopped for 90 days after the Gulf War. I was really scared.
It was 91, 92, something like that.
Man, our business was going and there were just no orders. Everybody froze. And for a month, they watched the war on television and they weren't doing business. That was actually a really scary thing. Could the world stop us doing our deal? And then it got back into the norms. And I think the crises since then have a lot less effect on business. People realize, hey, business is going to go. And then the most terrible thing of the last decade is the Chinese overcapacity issue in all forms of steel. And I've been going to Washington with the CPTI and lobbying for a decade on this, and our government officials just didn't understand that China was manipulating the currency. They didn't realize that they were building all this excess capacity. The Chinese were lying about taking old capacity out when they really built new and left the old in. And so, but I was just there last Wednesday and Thursday, and for the first time in a decade, and I told somebody the other day, our elected officials and staff members and everybody in Washington to a person realize that China has been cheating the U.S. for a decade. So it's not having to go there and educate them about it. It's now them asking, well, what do we need to do to stop it? What do we need to do? There'll be a lot of people, particularly in import and that thing, that say, we're talking about free trade, okay? Free trade is not the truth if it's not fair trade. When you deal with a country that subsidizes a business, meaning they don't charge them for electricity, they don't have to repay the loans if they can't, they don't have to pay interest if they can't, and their main job is to employ people, and that's their only job. Randy, you and I could run a business if that's all we had to do.
It would be easy.
Yeah. So it's taken a while to make sure that people understand it, but it's not fair trade. It's not free trade if it's not fair.
Sure, I totally understand and agree. Did you have a mentor in the steel pipe business?
I was thinking about that
because you've been in your own guy for all this time pretty much, other than Sal.
Yeah, there were lots of guys that always gave me, there were just guys that were steel mill guys, and there were just people that would give me advice. But the mentor I had, but it wasn't for the steel industry, was a gentleman named Edy Marshall, and he was a farmer. And in 1973, he farmed 20,000 acres. And 28,000 acres today would be a huge farm. I mean, a big farm. So if you can imagine in 1973, this guy farmed 20,000 acres. We'd get 12 combines in the field. And I'll never forget, and I've said this in a lot of business school, university meetings, the guy looked at me in like 74 and he said, "How much ground do you think we could farm if we could put lights on the tractors and just run them all night?" And I thought, how can you do this? You're the biggest farmer in southeast Missouri, and you're looking to run tractors all night. So what it told me is that there's always someplace else to go, and it made me feel that way. And no real guys. I mean, Sal was a good mentor, and he had run a business. He just didn't want to get bigger.
Yeah.
He was just happy at $2 million, and I wasn't being happy there.
Sure.
Yep.
Was there the lowest point, a toughest point, any specific, I know you talked about the Gulf War, but was there anything, that was just a real low point that?
The most discouraging that I can remember, and it's probably because it's the most recent. The last 3 years, not 18, but 15, 16, and 17 with China. Listen, we made money, but we improved and we did well, but it was really tough sledding with the cheating. Now, we weren't going to go out of business, but we worked really, really hard not to make the money you deserve, okay? But I will tell you in this, there were always times where you go, oh my God, are we going out of business? People get like that. That feeling happens, particularly when you're growing, the stair-stepping that happens. I tell people all the time on the stair-stepping, you make a whole bunch of money with the overhead you have, and then you go, guess what, if I get bigger, I'll just make more money. So you add more people, you add more equipment, you add more processes, but you don't get there, and all of a sudden you go, I've added all this and I'm not making any more, I'm making less money. So then you stair step to that one, and it just goes like this. So I say all the time, find a place you like and are comfortable with. You mentioned your number. Be a number, be the guy, and make the number work. That is really good advice, I think.
I agree with you. Are there one or two things that you wouldn't do if you could go back in time? That, something that you maybe could have changed, or a decision that...
Listen, I will tell you, we got out of the Roland Welded business because of some of the people that cheated and I didn't like. So that's the only thing I've ever stopped doing. We take something that has pipe to it that we can weld to it or add to it and and then make our own pipe. So our goal would be to consume all our own pipe and products, right? So then you've taken up an extra 15 or 20 points in margin. Nothing, I made a lot of bad decisions, but I made a lot of good decisions. And what I've really found is the economy, the particular economy we've been in, really dictates your success almost more than anything. We were there. The 80s were good with Ronald Reagan. The last decade for me was just, 2% or less GDP growth. It's not going to get you anywhere, right? And the federal government has not had an infrastructure bill for a long, long time. So we had a decade where we weren't investing in our country, in the infrastructure, and secondly, we let outside forces from around the world beat our steel industry. So it really condensed and made everything really, really difficult.
Gotcha. Kind of going off of the pipe business for one question, besides your career, what else are you most proud of? What do you get the greatest joy and satisfaction out of?
I'm involved with the University of Missouri, so I started along with a gentleman named Dave Spence. He actually is the first one to start it, something called the Entrepreneurial Alliance. And it's where we take kids interdisciplinary, meaning you could be in engineering school, business school, home ec, the medical profession. You bring these kids together and they spend 2 semesters learning from entrepreneurs how to start businesses, and they do pitches and they go through the process. So giving back to those guys is really, really rewarding. And then I give the university the seed money for something called the sales certificate. And I was just up there, we're in our 3rd or 4th year. We had 76 kids graduate with a sales certificate. When I was in school, people were embarrassed to say I'm being a salesman. And it's really funny, and I tell the kids today, be happy to be a salesman because you make more money than your boss if you're good. And your boss doesn't really care. And so we're trying to elevate at the university level sales as a position, okay? And academia really brought it down. And so I see them coming back. And so we have the sales certificate program where we placed, I'm talking about kids making out of school $50,000 to $65,000 a year in sales jobs. Now it's Procter & Gamble. We hire one person every 2 years, 1 or 2 every 2 years out of there, and they're starting at $50,000 or $55,000 as a steel sales job with a company. That's good pay, man. So I'm proud of those things that I got involved with the university. I like teaching, but we've also done a lot of products, man, like sign poles, and we're doing this product called Trilock, which is a non-welded joint since Permalock's patent had gone up. And so I think we were innovative. You know, we look at things differently and we kind of forge our own path. And so I tell everybody in the building, whatever you're selling, if it's piling, get in the piling association. If it's drilling, get in the drilling association and go there and be a part of it. And people will respect you, and then you'll be an industry leader, and then you'll make a really, really good living selling all your life. And what I liked about selling pipe was, ours is 7:30 to 4:30, although if you're the owner, it's later or earlier. But you could work 45 hours a week, man, and make a really good living and not have people, if you needed to call somebody in the weekend, it was because there was emergency, right? And so you have your life too. So it was really, really fortunate.
Yeah. As we wind down this interview, Robert, the one thing that I also want to ask you is there something I didn't ask you that you might want to bring up, a point of, you know, somewhere in your career or something about the pipe business? Obviously, I can see the passion. You know, as a fellow owner, you know, we seem to all have that. But is there something I didn't ask you? No,
I would just say for everybody, your job is to make people's lives better, okay? We're owners. I would tell you, I was in Washington and Wilbur Ross, and I got to ask him some questions and tell him some stuff. And I said, you know, the previous administration thought that business owners were running off with the money and that sort of thing, and we weren't very respected. And I would tell you, I disagree. I have 176 families that count on me every day to make payroll, okay? You know what makes you nervous? When you want to be nervous, you need to make payroll. Now, I don't have to think about making payroll today, but there was a time when you worried all the time. And that's the difference. And our job is to take the people that are involved with us and make their lives better. And we do it by sharing, by making our customers' lives better. And if you go with the more I give, the more I receive, I'm not doing it to receive. I'm doing it because it feels good to give, right? So I would just say give. Just keep giving, and it doesn't feel good all the time, and you get dirt kicked on you, dust it off, go back and ask for more, because the rewarding part is when you see some young guy come in or some young girl, or you see people down in the shop that go on and were hired in as a temp to sweep floors, and the guy ends up being your inventory clerk. Those are just great stories, right? And you've given people an opportunity. It's a great industry. It's a tough industry, man. Buckle your chin strap. Make sure you got a face shield on, because there's stuff flying all the time. So, and I want to congratulate you on being the president. You've been in the industry for a long, long time. I want to commend you for doing this, because I know you've interviewed a bunch of people. So hopefully you got some history back on, there's plenty of people that were there long before I was, but I still knew a lot of them had perspective.
Sure. Very good. Robert, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, my friend.
Yep.